Hello, good morning, almost afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We will be waiting 2 more minutes until 12:05 set, let's say, CET, until we start with this last smart underpin deep dive on digital product passport or DPP applied in energy-related manufacturing industry in the case of the underpin project. So stay tuned as we will be starting in 2 more minutes. Thank you. So, hello again. My name is Katia Lavin. I'm part of the Innovalia Association team in the Smart Tenants project. We are coordinators of the Smart Tenants project, and I'm part of the task of dissemination and communication, leading this knowledge transfer strategy that has been going on for the last almost year and a half. Today we are here for the fourth and last Smart Tenants Underpin Deep Dive or Smart Pin Deep Dive event. This event is focused on digital product passport or DPP applied in the energy related manufacturing industry in the Underpin project use cases. And today we have a speaker, Giorgos Chrysokentis from Watermelon organization. So first of all, let me introduce very briefly the agenda of the event. First, we have this very brief welcome and introduction session led by me, Katia Levin from Innovalia Association. Secondly, we have a slot for Giorgos Chrysokentis from Watermelon on digital product passport applied in energy-related manufacturing industry in Underpin. And then we will have a little slot for open discussion and questions and answers. So, before we jump into the main topic, just a very brief introduction on why we are actually here. So in 2023, two projects were funded, and they are the Digital 2022 Cloud AI Data Spaces for Manufacturing Call for Data Space for Manufacturing Deployment, Smart Tenants and Underpin. As part of both project strategy for knowledge transfer and open collaborative innovation, both projects have agreed to involve in these frequent Smart Underpin Deep Dive online events so that to expand the European and international knowledge on manufacturing related data spaces, technologies, components, and deployments. So consequently, these Smart Pin Deep Dives aim to be very brief online workshops dedicated to exploring the business and technical applications of data spaces. So today, our speaker, we have Giorgos Chrysokentis, who is Senior Business Consultant at Watermelon Consulting, specializing in the decarbonization and digitalization aspects in the fields of energy, transportation, and shipping. He holds a Master's of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from the National Technical University of Athens and a PhD or doctorate in Applied Mathematics from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Barcelona, Spain. So before joining Watermelon, Giorgos worked for the Greek Regulatory Authority for Energy, specializing in natural gas and hydrogen networks and markets, and prior to that, he was a postdoctorate fellow for the French Aerospace Lab (ONERA), working on turbulence modeling for aeronautical applications. He has extensive experience in energy markets and technologies, in particular renewable energy systems and hydrogen. So in the context of Underpin, Watermelon is in charge of the coordination and execution of the use cases in the refinery and the wind farms, as well as the creation of digital product passports or DPP for assets used in the use cases. The focus lies primarily on bridging the gap between the users and the data spaces, and as such, Giorgos also participates actively in the determination of the appropriate business models for the Underpin data space. So, without further delay, I would like to leave the ground to Mr. Giorgos Chrysokentis. So, please.
Thank you, Katya. Hello from me as well. Uh, I'm very happy to participate in this collaborative effort between Underpin and SmartEnance, exchanging the knowledge we've gained throughout the execution of our project and the lessons learned. It's very important not to repeat the same mistakes where possible. In my presentation, I will give you a brief overview of the Underpin data space. Some people who have participated in previous deep dives might have heard some of that stuff, but for new people, I think it's important to understand the context. I will then move to the digital product passports, including both general information, but also some information related to Underpin. And then I will explain what challenges we have faced, where we're at right now, and what are the lessons that we have learned, and what are the next steps that we're planning. So, as Katya mentioned, the Underpin project was part of the call from Digital Europe for data spaces in manufacturing. It is the consortium consists of 10 partners from 5 different countries, and it includes big players in the energy sector, ICT companies, and SMEs. And we also subcontract IDSA, Sovity, as well as a legal advisor to aid us in our efforts. The project has a duration of 24 months, and as of right now, we have entered the last 6 months of the project. So let's say we're in the final sprint to deliver the data space. Underpin specifically focuses on dynamic asset management and predictive maintenance, specifically in the energy sector. And the idea is that we want to offer a data space that guarantees secure data sharing and storage, cross-sectoral collaborations, making use of AI and blockchain technologies, and ideally evolving and creating new products and business models. Here in the left, you can see a very high level uh, concept of the data space where you have the data owner and the data user and all the services that make this data sharing possible in a secure and trusted way. Before we move on to the digital product passwords, I think it's important to get a bit of a context of what the use cases are, because the idea, at least originally, is that the digital product passports will be on equipment from those use cases. There's 2 use cases. The first one is the motor oil refinery in IU Theodori, and that's the actual picture of that refinery, including its port. And the idea here is that we have 5 compressor groups along the refining process, and we want to apply predictive maintenance algorithms to enhance their operations, especially since the refinery is a critical manufacturing, meaning that they are not allowed to fail, so to speak. The second use case pertains to the wind farms of more across Greece. Here you actually see one wind farm of more, although it's probably not the same as the use case because we have a sort of an anonymization requirement. We don't want to know, let's say, which wind farm it is. Here, the concept is a bit different because the company that supplies the wind turbines are subcontracted to apply the predictive maintenance. So here we move a bit more into the asset management where the owner wants to also have their tool so that they can uh, streamline their operations, know when the wind farms will have downtime, and so on. So with that in mind, let's move into the digital product passports. So I assume most people are familiar with the digital product passports since they are here for this talk. But as a very high level overview, Essentially, the digital product passport is a collection of product-related data, which can be accessed through a data carrier following a unique identifier. And in general, the idea is that the digital product passports will contain information related to sustainability, circularity, recycling, and so on. Some key information, if we can categorize them, would be to have obviously the product data, what the product is, what it consists of, what its technical specifications are, what certifications it has, tracking its life cycle, meaning the how it has been used, how it has been maintained, who has owned it so far, because especially in manufacturing, second-hand ownership is a pretty common aspect. So this is important information to have. Information regarding its sustainability, what's a carbon footprint for the production and the operation of the equipment, how much energy it uses, and other sustainability metrics. And last but not least, information on the end of life of the product, meaning how do I recycle this equipment or product or whatever it might be? Do I have the possibility of reusing some of the materials and so on? So looking at the regulation, if I had to highlight the main regulation, it would be the Eco Design for Sustainable Products regulation, but also other regulations have looked to adapt to that. The initial wave of products for digital product passports have been defined as batteries, the textiles, the electronics, and construction products. You can see here in the slide some of the timeline for their when the regulation comes into play. Not everything is finalized as of yet. And then a second wave, the DBPs will also start applying in other groups such as iron and steel, aluminium, tires, and various types of paints, chemicals, lubricants, and detergents. So the real question here is, what do I gain from having a DBP? The first and foremost, and it's almost in the name, it's the sustainability aspect, where if I have the DBP, I can have the pathway to design sustainable and recyclable products. A second aspect has to do with the supply chain efficiency, because the DBP ideally includes information across the supply chain of the product. That means that we can optimize materials and achieve reductions in procurement costs. And from the side of the business of the product owner, having the data in a presented in a streamlined way and stored in a streamlined way, you can reduce all administrative costs and complexity that is related to this data. And also, it is a way to maintain conformity with standards. And also, it will allow you to create business opportunities when you have a structured way of presenting the data and understanding the data that unlocks potentially new revenue streams based on those data, and creating new service models. Of course, since it is a regulation, having a DVP ensures that you comply with the regulatory framework, and also as a maybe not a side effect, as a secondary, let's say, effect, having a product with a digital product passport could be a way to protect your product against counterfeits. And finally, this is maybe at a higher level. We will have to see how it materializes, but especially for smaller manufacturers, I would say, having a digital product passport can give you the opportunity to differentiate your product from the competitors and potentially capture a larger market share. So still a bit on the general level, but making it a bit more specific is uh, you have to choose the product to create a digital product passport for. Taking the wind farms as an example, we took a look at what level the product could be. It could be at the system level, where you have maybe a digital product passport for the entire wind farm. It could be at the asset level, we would name it, which is the wind turbine itself. It could be a group of components with, in this picture, you see the nacelle of the wind turbine, which has all the generator, the gearbox, and so on. Or it could go to the component level. Here we have a gearbox or the sub-component, which is, for example, the bearings. We think, or at least initially, we considered those two last levels to be a bit more, I wouldn't say optimal, but since it's components that can be used in different products, maybe it makes more sense to look at those for digital product passports. And then the second determination is how do I choose what data goes into the digital product passport. The main two things is that the data needs to be available, of course. If I don't have data, then we can't actually talk about creating a digital product passport. And it also needs to be important. Not all data share the same importance. I found this graph very useful. It's from a paper by Jensen et al., which shows a, a bit of a mapping comparing the importance and availability. Obviously, ideally, you want to prioritize the green quadrant, which is available data, high availability on data, and high importance on data. But also, that doesn't mean that you can't look at other data, which less important data might not be as impactful, but they can still support decision making. And less available data means that you get to actually make the most of the rare data, so to speak. This is a bit of a timeline of how we envisioned the DBP. The idea is that we start from the user, which is a product, which is the data that I want to use in the digital product passport. We collect that data, and then Underpin sort of, let's say, takes over and standardizes and creates the DBP, and then in a continuous fashion checks and updates the data for the DBP, and obviously makes the DBP available for access. So moving into the more specific issues in terms of creating digital product passports in Underpin. As I mentioned, initially we were focused on the machinery involved in the use cases, that is the compressors and the wind turbines. But we have faced challenges so far. One main challenge is that since the DPPs are not mandatory in those sectors, not yet, and maybe not in the near future based on the regulations we've seen, there is a lack of incentive from the business, from the owner side, to actually create DVPs. And sort of sideways challenge as well is that they don't see the value in creating a DVP, and the truth is that it's not very easy to visualize the value without having gone through that process. And another important challenge is that the users that we have and the data owners, the product owners, have strict anonymization requirements, and that itself goes completely against the concept of DVP. You can't have a product and a digital product passport if you can't say what the product is. It's a major issue. So at the second step, we thought about involving the equipment manufacturers. So I have a compressor, maybe I go to the manufacturer of the compressor, I go to the manufacturers of the, let's say, different components. But even there was a challenge in that big manufacturing groups don't really need to come to Underpin for creating their DVPs. Some of those organizations probably already have a department working on that. And then we looked at alternative solutions. Okay, let's maybe forget about let's say the idea of how the DPP would be formed with materials and so on, information materials, sustainability and so on, and maybe create a service log for that equipment. But there we saw an issue. For example, in the refinery, they had some data was in books, some data was stored digitally, some data wasn't stored at all. So even something like that would not have the necessary information available. So we we thought to take a look at alternative options. The first one would be, okay, let's not look at the actual equipment in the use cases. Let's look at the auxiliary equipment. This could be for the wind farms. It could be, let's say, the wind masts that measure wind speed, temperature, and so on. In the refinery, it could be the sensors, for example, that capture all the data. And there you can make an argument that we can leverage the Underpin infrastructure to create and host the DVPs. We can maybe provide them a way to somewhat automate that process. And then, since especially since they typically the owners of those products are smaller companies, you give them the incentive to differentiate themselves from the competition. A second alternative option that we thought about, a bit more out there as a concept, is using the dataset themselves as a product, where you would have a digital product passport that tracks information on the provenance, the lineage, and generally how the dataset evolved throughout its life cycle. It could have technical specifications focusing on the quality and the integrity of the data, and who has been able to access it throughout it and use it throughout its lifetime. We also contacted IDSA with that idea. They were very interested in the concept. And the last option we considered was having the software that is used in the use cases as a product. There you would have information about the purpose of the product, of the software, how it performs, what issues are known and how they could be fixed, information about the licensing and usage, and so on. But even here, we encountered challenges. In terms of the auxiliary equipment, still it was hard to actually bring the equipment providers on the table and have them participate in that effort. And it proved to be a long and complicated process, especially since our the use case owners are large companies. So it's a very complicated process to actually establish that communication. In terms of the data sets, one main issue is that it's not very clear how you verify the changes made in the dataset. So, okay, let's say we can create a digital product passport, but in the end, who verifies that the information you provide in the passport is accurate and it's up to date? A second issue is more with the idea itself that, okay, I can say I have a digital product passport about the dataset, but is a dataset really a product? That's very ambiguous. And in terms of the software as a product, which is where we ended up doing most of our work, sometimes it's unclear how to translate the features of the software to schema properties for the DVPs. And in the same vein, you often have various ontologies for the same property, so it's not very clear what to choose, why, and how to proceed in that sense. Nevertheless, we proceeded with the software as a product and we created a DVP template for the software. This has gone through a lot of iterations. We have an original idea. We took it to the software owners. They had issues with specific information in terms of if it was necessary, if it was easy even to attain and put in the digital product passport. And this, after a few iterations, this is a template we have created. Obviously, it has a general information: what is the software, what is the version of the software I'm looking at, who developed it, and who can I contact, and when it was released. But then going to the technical specifications, one major thing is the software bill of materials, meaning what software was used to create the software I have the DVP for. That is important both for tracking vulnerabilities, as we will see later, but in general to know what has been used for the software, what type of license I need to access the software, uh, where where the documentation is for me to understand and use the software, how often it is maintained, how often it gets new versions, and so on. and what data the software both uses and takes as input. And the last section would be the security. Here we have the vulnerabilities as I explained, so the security protocol that is used for the software, and the authentication protocol that is used to handle data, because after all, one major aspect of the DPPs is that you need to ensure uh, the data sovereignty and the reliability and integrity of the data that is used by the software. And then we went to map those features to schema properties. Here also was a major part of the iteration because we followed the way of creating the template and then looking at the schemas. But in practice, that wasn't actually practical, and we sort of had to mix and match. And ideally, probably you start from the properties and then translate the properties to the different features of the digital product passport. I won't go uh, one by one for the properties, but you will have the presentation, and if you have any questions, you can, of course, either ask them here or reach to me through email. So, looking at the lessons that we've learned, as I explained, when the DPPs are not, for sectors where the DPPs are not obligatory, at least not yet, there is a lack of motivation to actually participate in those efforts. And the idea, the truth is that we even try to, let's say, leverage the regulation and said that, okay, even if it's not mandatory now, the way things are going, it will become mandatory. But even that was not, as it seemed, a strong enough argument to convince the product owners. The second major issue that we had, I explained it as a challenge, but it's also a lesson learned in the further planning, is to that the process that you have to go through, especially if you want to track information across the supply chain of a product, is very long, and that means that you have to plan ahead, and it's something that sort of went out unstated in our original planning, that we didn't expect that it would take that long. And as I explained in terms of the properties, uh, you can't actually go for the template first and then try to match with schema properties. It has to be a sort of a feedback loop. So what is our current status and what are the next steps? So we're now in the process of collecting the necessary info for the software that is used in our use cases. Once that is done, we will create those software DVPs, and in parallel, we are looking to integrate them into the data space or the authority portal. There's already some work done in there where the user will be able to see what software is used, and next to each software, there will be a link with a digital product passport, assuming the user has the appropriate access rights. At this stage, in terms of the software bill of materials, we are doing it a bit manually to expedite the process. So only the more important, so to speak, software that was used will be included in the digital product passport. But if we want to be correct in our approach, we would have to automate this process, and there is specific tools that do this exact job. So we're in the process of reviewing the tools, and we understand that obviously, since different software was created in different ways with different programming languages, there's not a single tool that can do that job for us. So we will have to follow an ad hoc procedure, different tools for different softwares. We are also looking to establish a feedback channel with Sherpas2. So far, we have been following, let's say, the findings of Sherpas and now Sherpas2. But now, especially since our idea is maybe a bit to use a layman's term out there, it would be a good point to actually establish a communication channel where we can give feedback to Sherpas and we can get feedback from Sherpas. And another point we're looking at is to examine alternative products for DPP candidates. Now we're going away from the use cases as a whole, and we're maybe looking at different stakeholders, especially stakeholders that will be affected by the regulation. That is lubricants, fuels. That could be in our mind green hydrogen. I get the hydrogen. I want to have a digital product passport that explains how it was created, what was the renewable energy that was used, and so on, so that I know that my hydrogen is green because of those reasons. And in the same maybe sense, have a digital product passport of about renewable energy, akin a bit to guarantees of origin for the energy, again explaining that this energy is renewable. This is important. And that is all for me. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to any questions.
Thank you so much, Giorgos, for your presentation. Actually, we have a little slot for questions and answers, but we have already received a couple of questions in the chat insofar. Just so that all the public and the audience knows how to actually ask questions, there's a little chat that has like two little clouds. You can click on it and write your questions, and we give 2 minutes for everyone to put their questions before Yorgos proceeds to start answering the existing questions already. I just realized I was in mute. Sorry, my bad. I was about to say, it seems there is no more questions, but while we wait for any potential last questions on the topic, let me actually introduce the first question from Claudia. So, hello, thank you for this interesting topic. I have one question. How do you assure interoperability of DPP and data spaces? That's the first question. So you're mute, Yorgos, remember.
Yeah, interesting question, and it's not a very easy one to answer, I'm assuming. I know. The truth is that we're still looking into that. That's the idea of why we wanted to map the features of the DPP template with specific schemas, so that we're not actually, let's say, storing and creating and storing information randomly, so to speak. So yeah, at this point, I would say my idea is to follow that procedure, and then I would invite you, since I'm less from the technical side of things in terms of interoperability. If you have any more specific question, feel free to send me an email, and I will get you in touch with more technical savvy, let's say, people.
There is actually one more question on that line, which is how is information shared under what standards? Like what standards are ruling the information or data sharing in the DPP right now?
That is still under determination, so to speak. So
Okay.
yeah, I'll defer to my previous suggestion to send me an email so that I can give you more elaborate information.
Okay, interesting. So next question from Claudia too. How deep does the DPP have to go into the value or supply chain?
I think here the clear answer is the deeper, the better. I think we ideally you would want to go to the source and have a clear idea, if we're talking about physical products at least, uh, of the materials used both in the creation of the product itself, but ideally also the various components. Because if we're talking about sustainability and especially recycling, that's the very important information to have. Specifically, if we're looking at the wind farms, in our case, I mentioned the gearbox as a component, but a very clear component that I would expect DPPs to be necessary for would be wind turbine blades, since there is an issue about recycling wind turbines that are past their lifetime. So for that DPP, you would need extensive information, for example, about the materials used and so on. So ideally, you would have to go all the way back to the source.
Okay, that's very interesting too, because this is in this specific use case of refineries and wind farms, but maybe in other sectors it's not necessary to go all the levels, or maybe there's like some of the components or some of the levels that can be included in the DPP. Actually, on that line of thought, there's another question, which is how much data is necessary to be shared in the DPP. So this is also aligned with what you just said. So the deeper the better, right?
Yeah,
But I understand that the question goes aligned in how much amount of data is necessary in the DPP.
I
Is there a minimum?
I think that's on an ad hoc basis. You decide based on the product how much data. I think in the end, it's also a bit to do. It depends on the product and a bit to do with what your usage of the DPP is. If you want the consumer to have that information, then you have to, maybe you don't need to go too deep in terms of technical data and so on, and just have the high level idea of what materials were used, how green, let's say, the product is, to use that term. Now, if you want to go to the concept of I have a DPP and then I sell the equipment, and the person that buys the equipment now could be considered a consumer, but the person that buys the equipment for the same use probably wants to know to have more available information about what the product has gone through. So there you would need to go to a deeper level, I would want.
Mhm. Okay, and the last question, who chooses or identifies the data to be included in the DPP?
That's a question that maybe is a bit unanswered in my mind still. I would think that at least at the first approach, the product owner needs to identify why they're making the digital product passport, and based on that decision, which is more of a business decision maybe than a technical decision, then after you have answered that, which is essentially is the use case for the DVP, then the owner identifies the data, and if you have to bring other players into the process, then maybe it could be a collaborative effort, but at the first level, yeah, the product owner.
So, so in the end, it's the final producer who decides.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, this is very interesting. Hopefully, we will have more information as the Underpin project continues and ends with the use cases as well. And hopefully, in future iterations of DPP applications in other sectors, as this is something that is going on in several projects, such as you mentioned CIRPAS 2. Actually, in SMARTENANCE, we also have one use case with DPP applied in textiles. So this is something that is, as I mentioned, an ongoing topic, as DPP is one of the most innovative technologies that are quite common right now in the sphere. I think that also in automotive sector, it's something that it has been mentioned. So hopefully we will have more information on all these questions, on the data that to be shared, the deeper the supply chain that has to be involved, and the data set that can actually be shared, and not only with the consumer but within the supply chain as well. So hopefully we'll have more information.
Yeah, hopefully.
Anyhow, thank you so much, Giorgos, for your contribution and your presentation today at this last and fourth Smart Enough Underpin Deep Dive. It has been very interesting. And thank you for joining and enlightening us with your presentation.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for taking the initiative to create this collaborative effort.
Okay,
It is
great.
very helpful to exchange knowledge.
Hopefully, we will contribute to expanding data spaces through Europe. And thank to the audience for joining us not only today, but in the last Smart Tenants and Smart Pin deep dives. We will be back hopefully after the summer. So
Perfect.
stay tuned in social media. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.
Bye.